Hello, hi. Welcome to the Offsiders Podcast. Today, we have a little bit of a controversial topic. Something that has been very big in the news lately. And something that I'm sure all of our football avid fans have heard of before, or at least seen on Sky Sports. Or
certainly heard about recently.
Exactly, yeah, recently more than ever. But it all kind of started last year with Ronaldo's big move from United and obviously joining Al Nassr. And yeah, so if you haven't figured it out yet, today's episode is about the Saudi Pro League and how we feel about it and its comparisons to the Chinese Super League. So we hope we have you captivated, because this is something that I've had a lot of thoughts about, a lot of opinions about coming up recently, lots of arguments as well, fors and against and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, let's get right into it. So we're going to talk about the comparison. Well, let's first talk about the Saudi Pro League, and then we'll talk about the Chinese Super League, and then we will do a little bit of a comparison between the two of them. So our first segment, looking at the composition of the Saudi Pro League, it is obviously in Saudi Arabia. It is a Middle Eastern country. They are part of the Asian area, so they don't compete in UEFA. I'm actually not sure what the federation's like acronym is.
It has a very involved name.
I remember researching this for one of our past episodes.
I know they have their own Champions League.
So they have a separate Champions League. They only compete with European teams at a level, obviously the Club World Cup, which could be expanding soon, but at the moment is quite a small competition, only reserved for the Champions League winners of each federation. So breaking down a little bit more about the actual Pro League, there are 16 teams. It is a regular season, unlike some of the Scandinavian countries who want to do weird ass leagues.
Even the Belgian league. Yeah,
it's very odd, and playoffs and here and there and all that kind of stuff. So luckily this one is pretty straightforward. It's 30 games played, and whoever has the most points at the end of those games is obviously crowned champion. I am not 100% sure about the way that the Champions League works, because they have, again, their format is very, very different. I'm not sure how many teams make it in there. There's no real, there is information. I just have not done the research, I'm not going to lie.
Nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
So 16 teams. The notable ones that we know and we've all heard about recently is obviously Al Nassr. That's where Ronaldo plays. Al Ittihad. Lots of players have been moving to there. Al Hilal is also a very well-known one at the moment. Al Shabab has quite a cool badge. I quite enjoy.
Al Sadd
as well. They're up there. And the rest of them are kind of really nothing we've really heard of. The bottom of the table is obviously propped up by Al Batin at the moment. Al Ittihad notably have won the league with 22 wins, amassing 72 points, beating Al Nassr by 5 points. So very straightforward in terms of the league composition. I wouldn't say very few teams, but definitely unusual amounts. We're used to the 20, 18 league, 24 in the lower leagues of the English football, and most of Europe is 20, 18. Kind of those amounts. So it's very interesting to see quite a low number. Moving on to the composition of the nationalities. Who plays, what group of nationalities play in the Saudi Pro League? So obviously, and without any surprise, 366 of the players within the league are Saudi Arabian, and generally leagues will have that. They'll push their players to their national players to play there, and so on and so on. Next, which is not a surprise as well, the second highest population of players is Brazilians with 28. So lots of Brazilian players of a quality where they're good enough to play professional football, but not of a quality to play at really any significant league, In third place is actually a surprising one. It's Morocco. So I think obviously it being Morocco being a Muslim country, they probably transition really well into Saudi Arabia. Followed by Algeria with 8. And then coming in 5th is Spain, also with 8. And then up until 10, we have Colombia, Argentina, Cameroon, Portugal, and Peru. And Peru only having 4, which is quite an interesting one. Still Peru of all places, having a decent amount. And I mean, we have all kinds of nationalities here. We have North Macedonian, we have Gabonese, Tunisian, Congo. Yeah, so really it's quite a diverse league, but not many of those. 1 or 2 from those countries there. Moving on to the net worth of the league. This is something which will have a lot more emphasis later on. And we'll see a disparity between what I have to say and what we have to say later in a segment. So, according to Transfermarkt, the Saudi Pro League's net worth is $318.28 million. If that figure sounds absurdly low to you, there's a reason to that, and we'll get into that later. But obviously, the clubs that are worth the most are Al Nassr, which has a value of 71.4 million, Al Shabab with 41.6 million, Al Hilal with 37.5 million, and then Al Ittihad with 28.03 million. So really, really, really small values in terms of what the club's are actually worth. Yeah, but again, those numbers become a lot more significant when we speak about the financials of the league. Okay, now obviously our comparison is with the Chinese Super League, and the reason we make this comparison is because they had a very similar approach to building their league, however many years ago it was. The Saudi Pro League as a league itself has been around since 1976, so it's quite old, but it's only gained significance quite recently. So the Chinese Super League was only established in 2004. Sure. So in terms of longevity, the Saudi Pro League is much older, but they seem to be copying what the Chinese Super League did quite a few years ago. But yeah, we can see that there's already a correlation between the amount of teams in the league and who is from where and who plays in the league. So, for example, same like the Saudi Pro League, where the Saudi Pro League had 388 Saudi Arabians playing in it. The Chinese Pro League has 380 Chinese players within the league, and a lot less foreign nationals. So we can see that there is a kind of a comparison, but I think the Saudis have got a much bigger group of international players. So moving on to market value, this is where there's a massive big difference. So obviously the Saudi Pro League was 318 million. The Chinese Super League is 146.17 million. So less than half of the value of the Saudi Pro League. And so a lot less money within there. Okay, well, so we can see that they are very similar in nature. I think the difference for me at this point is obviously where the money is coming from and the way that they've spent that money in both cases.
It seems like Saudi have a lot more money to play with.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that will obviously, how do we put it? I think that more international groups are willing to do business with teams or with the country of Saudi than they were willing to do with the country of China, you know. Which makes this availability of resources and players significantly bigger and more widespread.
The reason we actually are talking about this in the first place is obviously bring it back to Ronaldo. It's his signing from Man United to Al Nassr. I don't actually remember the fee. I think it was like 20 mil or something like that. It was very little.
Very low money.
And it's a huge signing. I mean, he's one of the best players ever in the history of football. Everyone thought that potentially when he was forcing his way out of Man United, it was to go to another European club in the Champions League. And he shocked everyone by going to the Saudi Pro League. But it's not the first signing. He's just the biggest one.
Yes.
There were signings before that got our attention on Saudi League. Odion Igalo. Also, when his loan spell ended at Man United, he went to the Saudi League from the Chinese Super League. Mateus Pereira was the one I think I remember most vividly, where it was like he had a wonderful season at West Brom in the Premier League, touted for a big move to a big club, and all of a sudden he's in Saudi, and he's on Instagram saying, listen, this was an offer of a lifetime and set my family up for life. Like I had to accept it. Understandable. Since Ronaldo, they've been fairly quiet up until that point, up until the Ronaldo signing. Pretty much, they were pretty quiet. They had signed, a couple players, Igalo, Mateus Pereira, a couple others, Talisca, I think.
Yes.
Some fringe players, really.
Yeah, some fringe players. No one crazy. So they're dipping their toes in sports after making a couple small signings just to improve the quality, and then they buy Newcastle United. Fee of roughly around £350 million, which is actually very little. I can't believe Newcastle went for that price.
Yeah.
But they bought Newcastle United. They are the majority owners of Newcastle United. And they've actually been doing an interesting project there. I mean, bringing in Eddie Howe, they've made some sensible signings. They're taking it slow. It's very interesting to see, because you'd expect, based on other things we know about them, that they'd go in, buy these big players, buy Neymar, buy, the huge players. Eden Hazard was one of the ones linked early on. They haven't. They've come in sensible.
I think that was
interesting.
I think that was also everyone's fear. I think everyone was so afraid that they would go and do that. But I think they shocked everyone by not doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's,
So, making waves with Newcastle, dipping their toes in other sports, couple fringe signings, then they sign Ronaldo. And then it flips on its head. Ronaldo goes, he brings a lot more attention to the league, a lot more eyes to the league. Suddenly, they have a 75% ownership in 4 Saudi Arabian clubs. The PIF themselves have a 75% ownership in Al Nassr, Al Ittihad, Al Hilal, and Al Ahli. And that's really where it starts to get interesting, because now they own Newcastle. They own 4 Saudi Saudi clubs, teams. They've bought Ronaldo. They're dipping their toes in other sports with these huge big money deals. And that's where we get to an interesting impasse in the transfers, where we look at Al Shabab, one of the, as Riley mentioned, one of the most valuable teams in the Saudi League. The only one on that list, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that isn't 75% owned by the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund. They're also the only team to not yet make a big European marquee signing. They have no big European players in their team. I mean, they have European players, but there's players like, I don't know, like Santi Mina and...
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck is that?
It's mostly Saudi players here. So that's an interesting look at them. And they're doing all right in the Saudi Pro League. They're an interesting exception, and I wonder why that is.
Yeah.
It's interesting to look at.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was a slight tangent. Then it brings us to this summer. And their interesting link with Chelsea. So far, this transfer window, they have signed Karim Benzema from Real Madrid. That's a huge signing. He's recently won the Ballon d'Or. They signed 4 Chelsea players, rumored to sign another 2, and a Wolves player. So the 4 Chelsea players in question are N'Golo Kante, Koulibaly, Hakim Ziyech, and Edouard Mendy. Players, it's interesting because it's players who Chelsea almost had as dead wood and would have struggled to move on, and probably would have been punished for having them on the wage bill. I mean, I know especially Koulibaly had a 5-year deal, 350k a week.
Huge.
A huge deal. I mean, they would have struggled to find him a suitor, especially after that last season. I mean, it looked like he was completely finished at the top level.
Yeah.
So, already there's question marks. It's almost arguing, is the Saudi Pro League doing Chelsea a favour by getting these players off of them?
Mm-hmm.
Dylan! You son of a bitch.
Favour.
Which is interesting. It's very interesting. And then we look at Clear Lake Capital. 60% owners of Chelsea, the Clear Lake Capital Group. And there's an interesting thing that was uncovered recently, where the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund is one of the large corporations that invested in Clear Lake Capital. They invested 5% of the 50 billion investment in Clear Lake Capital, which is 2.5 billion in Clear Lake Capital.
Okay.
So it's a 5% investment. It's not a huge investment.
Yeah.
They don't own Clear Lake Capital,
Yeah.
but they have ties with Clear Lake Capital
Yes.
and Todd Bowley.
Yes.
Additionally, they own Newcastle, who this transfer window are rumored to be linked with Cucurella, another deadwood Chelsea player that they need to get rid of. And it's kind of interesting that they only seem to be going at this moment for big name players and Chelsea players.
Chelsea has become a feeder club.
Yeah.
They are the new
It's
Southampton.
it does bring into question whether or not they have any vested interest in helping Chelsea, or maybe even just a little cheeky relationship with Todd Bowley and Clear Lake.
I think that the very important point with this whole concept is the fact that it is very illegal to own two clubs in the same league.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or to even have interest in two clubs in the same league.
Yeah.
Simply because it creates this kind of this like Luke says, feeder club mentality where
Or like, we'll do you a favour in this game and you do us a favour in the next game.
Yeah, maybe
Exactly.
Chelsea lose a dodgy penalty decision
Yeah.
to Newcastle
Yeah.
or something.
and it's a problem as well because we see it with the Red Bull clubs where someone the team like
Salzburg.
Red Bull Salzburg gets bled constantly to feed Red Bull Leipzig. You know, all of their best players all the time are constantly leaving,
Yeah.
and I mean they're paying money, but they're not paying money because it's
They're paying to themselves.
they're literally
Yeah.
paying themselves
Yeah.
for the transfer of these players. So it ends up
In the City group as well.
exactly, and the City group is a lot less significant to be fair
Mm.
because they have much smaller clubs. But it could become a situation like this, and I think that's why it's become such a big issue.
Yeah, the Saudis could do this to football in
Yes,
general.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's really the look at their transfer business and the Chelsea links.
It's almost like it's a very clever strategy because they like you said they brought in these older players, but they're all Muslim.
Yes. Yes.
So now they brought them in. Now they go knocking on Wolves' door for Neves. Now Neves obviously doesn't have any links to it, but now he's looked. He's like, listen, Ronaldo's gone there.
Yeah.
All these other big players have gone there, offering good money.
I'll make that deal. How about you, you bitch? You make that deal?
I'd make that deal.
I don't blame you. Damn good deal.
So I mean, I feel like if they went in for Neves first, they wouldn't have got him.
Yeah. There's no ways.
So I think having all these other big players they brought in
Yeah.
with ease because they have links.
It's like
religion.
signing the older Muslim players is actually helping their strategy
Yeah.
progress.
They're making the league more attractive almost.
Yeah,
By
they
signing
can.
big
Yeah,
players.
they're signing players that firstly the Saudi Arabian people will like, and secondly players that want to go to the league
Yeah.
that are of a high profile. It is very clever, but it also is a huge coincidence that they mostly happen to be Chelsea players.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that finishes off our transfer section.
Yes. So very interesting. A little bit controversial. And I think it becomes even more controversial when we move on to our third topic, and Luke gives us some insight into where this money is actually coming from. Take us away, Luke.
So the big pot of gold, the Saudi Public Investment Fund. So just some little nuggets of info here for you. It was created in 1971. Was that just a few years before the league was created? Wasn't it? No, the league was
Yeah, 'cause 1976.
Yeah.
So that also probably has correlation
Yeah.
to the creation of the league.
Yeah, created in 1971 for the reason so the government can literally just invest into things. That is what it was made for. That's what's used for. There's around about 514 billion pounds sitting in it, and majority of it is made up from obviously the selling of oil and natural gas. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest producers of it. 60% of it goes towards sporting activities within Saudi Arabia itself, and the rest going towards outside country, all their other investments into sport. The fund is completely controlled by the Prince of Saudi Arabia, and it is currently Mohammed bin Salim Al Saud. Probably butchered that.
That's easy.
Yeah, listen. Actually, just an apology for this entire episode's pronunciation. I'm sure we have made a mess of lots of stuff. So, yes.
Yeah, so he is the Saudi prince, and he is also the newly elected Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia.
I wonder if so. Elected probably in inverted commas.
The prince probably elected him.
Yes, the prince did the election.
And then just a little random fact about him. In 2018, he was ranked as the 8th most powerful person in the world.
Jesus. That's a decent title.
That
to
is,
be fair.
yeah,
That is a decent title.
hard list to get onto. Now, before I go into the football side, I just want to touch into some of the other investments that the Public Investment Fund has in other sports. Now, one of the main sponsors you'll see is a sponsor called Aramco. I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
And Aramco is Saudi Arabia's government-owned official oil group. They provide the biggest amount of money towards that Public Investment Fund. And currently, because of the war between Ukraine and Russia, and obviously Russia is also one of the massive oil and gas tyrants, but because of that war, prices for oil and natural gas have skyrocketed, and it has seen Aramco's profits rise by 90% within the last year.
90%?
Wow, that's a huge profit
So
margin.
they have been raking it in.
Yo, to say the least. Oh my days.
Following on with the Aramco, it has dipped its toes into a sport we enjoy, Formula One.
Yes.
But not just Formula One, Formula 2, 3, as well as investments in the Aston Martin team,
Jeez.
as well as the F1 Esports League as well. So they are all over Formula One.
Well, motorcar racing in general. It
In
seems,
general, yeah. The PIF is also there, like I said, they're a major shareholder in the Aston Martin team, but also in Aston Martin themselves as a company.
Okay.
And I did see recently the PIF was looking to do a takeover pretty much of F1 to buy them out.
Sure.
For I think F1 is valued around, I think it was about $15 billion US dollars, and they offered around 20 billion for it. The offer was declined because I believe I can't remember the name of the current owners, but they only recently bought the Formula One franchise in 2017 or 18.
That's great. And the fact is that that 15 billion is just a drop in the water of the amount of money they have in the PIF.
That is pocket change for them.
It's not even 10%.
Yeah, not even.
And think about when they bought
insane.
Newcastle, how little money that was for them.
Yeah.
300 million.
Oh, that
What?
to them, that's like the random like $2 coin you find in your fucking pocket after it goes to the
It's
wash.
nothing.
Crazy.
Then moving on to the next one. Esports and gaming, they have actually also dipped their toes into. They've made plenty of investments because their largest generation is under 35 years old.
Really?
So quite a very young generation in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
So obviously this has prompted them to invest in game and esports. And one of the most recent acquisitions is buying $3 billion worth of stock in some leading US video game publishers, such as Activision, EA, and Take-Two.
No way.
So
Yeah.
some massive names.
That's huge.
Sure. That is very interesting.
They're like the microtransaction companies.
Oh,
so
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, especially with fucking EA in there.
That's right, folks. Longtime owner Mr. Krabs is opening a new restaurant called the Krusty Krab 2. First of all, congratulations, Mr. Krabs.
Hello, I like money.
What inspired you to build a second Krusty Krab right next door to the original?
Money.
And
There you go.
Activision.
Yeah.
And then another big sponsor within the esports and gaming is, don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Neom, Neom. they're also quite a big PIF-backed company that does sponsor a lot of all their gaming and esports functions. But they are also the company that's busy back in the creation of that line that they build in.
Oh yeah.
So they're
Fuck, I forgot about that.
they're the company behind that.
Lion City in the desert.
Yeah. But they are also the sponsors for all of the Asian football cups,
Holy shit.
men's and women's. They are the sponsor for the Spanish Super Cup
No ways.
as well. And then they're also sponsor in motorsport for McLaren Racing and Mercedes-Benz.
Bro, you can't write it. It's actually it's ridiculous.
Damn, McLaren and Benz.
Yeah.
And you said they had a stake in Aston Martin.
And they will also be the main sponsor for the upcoming Asian Winter Games in 2029. So
That's insane.
they put out a thing to say that by 2030 they want to host about 25 World Championships in all different kind of sports.
Sure.
So I'll throw up a list that I have of all the sporting events held by Saudi Arabia since 2018. You can have a little gander at it. Everything from basketball, boxing, cycling, esports, handball,
Oh yes,
horse racing,
I know about Crown Jewel in WWE. That's apparently a huge,
Snooker.
tennis,
thing.
snooker.
WWE gets like 200 million per show that they produce in Saudi Arabia, which is crazy.
Jeez.
Weightlifting, wrestling, running, just any sport, everything. And this is just from
Basketball
2018.
even. They even got basketball out of America. That's crazy.
That's insane. They're just creating a monopoly at this point. It's just like one fucking giant monopoly.
And then finally onto the football side. Obviously, we spoke a little bit about it, but I mean, like spoken about Newcastle, and that was probably the first domino to fall to start this whole thing.
Yeah.
You can already see the impact that takeovers had. I mean, they were 11th in the 21-22 season, and they went from 11th to 4th. Obviously, this past season.
Even 11th was after they bought Eddie Howe in.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just one season difference to jump so far up the table.
Before
into
then, they were
Champions League.
relegation candidates.
Their previous highest finish before the takeover was in the 11-12 season where they finished 5th.
That's insane. Yeah, so it's been more than 10 years since they've done this well.
Yeah.
And it's very clear what the reason is.
And obviously we've touched on them buying stakes in the 4 biggest clubs in the Saudi Pro League. It was a 75% stake in the 4 clubs, with the other 25% being owned by non-profit organizations, but those non-profit organizations are backed by the PIF.
Yeah.
So,
So they own
100% club.
yeah.
So it's, trust us, we don't own the whole thing, don't worry.
Yeah. And I did see that they do have investments in 4 other teams within the Saudi Pro League, but not enough to own them, but there are investments in those clubs as well.
Okay.
And then it's one factor that the PIF doesn't have to deal with in comparison to all the other leagues is there is no FFP regulations.
I have to be fair in the Saudi league.
Money's money.
I get it. I understand why players go. It's a
Yeah.
stupid amount of money to say no to.
Yeah, and again, it's life changing. Like if football wasn't life changing enough already.
Yeah, like a player like Edouard Mendy, of course he's going to take the money.
Yeah.
Of course.
Think about how many fucking hospitals Sadio Mane could build if he got his hands on
Yeah.
that cash. Jesus.
He could build a whole new country.
He would be the new director of who?
And then another thing, there's quite a few private sectors in the Saudi Arabia that, like we see now with the United takeover, it is a private takeover, but that doesn't really mean that there is an influence from the government or the public sector, because many of the royal family are in control of the private sector.
Yes.
Another thing that I found, Saudi Arabia is also apparently getting very comfy with FIFA and the president himself.
Yeah, we know how much FIFA love their cash.
Yeah. Since May 2021, when Saudi Arabia asked FIFA to look at doing a World Cup for men and women every 2 years, which apparently the president very much liked, but was ultimately rejected by the board. But then the idea came up again after the most recent World Cup in 2022, but to have a World Cup one World Cup every 3 years, which again the president also quite liked. But then also back in 2021, the FIFA president took part in a promotional video for the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Sport, which caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
Jeez.
March 2022, he was back in Saudi Arabia having a meeting with the Ministry of Sport, the Prince, and the President of the Saudi Arabian Football Federation to review areas of cooperation and potential opportunities for further development of Saudi football.
Big inverted commas on that one.
Oh, yeah.
Big inverted. He was there for a holiday, all expenses paid, please.
And then the most recent one, August 2022, the president attended the heavyweight boxing title fight that was taking place in Saudi Arabia, but not just as a visitor, not just one in the crowd. He was sitting right next to the prince, nice and comfy.
In the VIP box.
And this is all leading up to with Saudi Arabia planning to submit a bid to host the 2030 World Cup. But I do see that apparently they have pulled out of it.
Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, so it's believed that they will go back in for a bid for the 2034 World Cup just by themselves.
Christ.
And then another thing to touch on, obviously Ronaldo joining. He's the crown jewel of the league, to put it lightly. And it just so happens that his team that he went to, Al Nassr, is favourite amongst the royal family as well.
No, look at that.
So,
Certainly not for their kids, that's for sure.
And then, obviously, Messi was heavily linked with the move to Saudi Arabia, but ultimately moved into Miami. But that doesn't mean Saudi Arabia does not have him, because Messi is actually Saudi Arabia's new tourism ambassador for the country.
Oh,
Yes.
you've got to be joking.
That's why he got kicked out of PSG. He went to Saudi Arabia under contract obligation,
Yeah.
and PSG didn't authorize it.
Yeah.
It's the visit Saudi Arabia thing.
So even though he's not playing there, he's still spending plenty of time there.
And they wanna use their money in something that people enjoy, sport, to make Saudi Arabia seem a lot better. People will have a more positive image of Saudi Arabia if they're the guys who run F1. They're the guys who own Newcastle. They're the guys who, do
like stuff.
that seems more fun.
Yeah. An interesting case study. I think it'll take some time to see where it goes. And I think, Luke obviously went back to the comparison between the Chinese Super League and Saudi Pro League, where as now, I think the Chinese Super League is kind of flops. Everyone expected it to be this huge, massive next big thing, but it has subsequently failed.
You can also compare it to MLS. Signing old bastard players, trying to make a name for themselves.
Yeah. And I think whereas the MLS has gone by a bit more of a much less aggressive approach, whereas I feel like these two leagues have really gone at it as hard as possible with big money transfers for players who are obviously old, but also not completely out of their prime. Whereas I think I agree with Luke in saying that I think they'll be around a lot longer than the Chinese Super League, simply because they have the funds to.
No.
And they're not going anywhere,
Even if we don't see them as prominently in football, we'll see them in the golf, we'll see them in the F1, we'll see them in WWE, boxing.
Everywhere, basically.
But I think it'll be very, very interesting to see what does happen, because there is the potential for something really, really big, both good or bad. It could become a terrible thing, or it could become a really good thing. So I think it'll be quite interesting.
Time will tell.
Time will tell.
But thank you so much for tuning into the Offsiders Podcast. We hope you found this one interesting. Give us your opinions. Let us know what you think about the Chinese Super League. Is it valid? Is it something you want to see more of? Maybe they should join UEFA. See them play in the Champions League. That'll be quite interesting.
Why not?
At this point, why not? Thank you so much. We will catch you guys next time. Cheers.
Peace.
Cheers.